there with the school report card update.
Yes.
Policy updates?
The question the point I had for 4K, we need to set a fee. Okay, the recommendation is to set it at $15 because half the kindergarten fee.
I like that.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Also
Thank you.
move.
And then coming up in policy,
I just have a question, what does the fee cover?
consumables, is registration fee.
There will be some curriculum materials also.
But we can't charge it for. Well, that's my only question on a 4K level, how many consumables will we be consuming? I don't know,
What's that? What's the other for?
never been shown deviation to the 4K environment. That was just a question. Okay, so I want to make sure it's not arbitrary number.
When we start picking out curriculum stand, you'll know about all those little things. Buses,
Perfect.
blue, and
Coming up in the policy conversation is also the discussion of whether or not to have early entrance for 4-year-olds in the 4K program. But we can talk about that in policy, I just don't want to foreshadow it.
I did read that.
all right, now I know you're excited to hear about the state report cards, all of that lovely packet that I sent to you over the weekend. My goal today is a team effort with principals, and so I would just like to highlight a few of the key pieces in the state report cards, and also talk about what are the key areas that I think are worthy of looking at further when you look at those state report cards. And then the principals are here to talk about their individual school goals. So they'll do that, and we have that on slides too, so I can be the clicker for you. Okay? Okay? Clicker girl. All right. So I'm going to show you a very quick video, which does a really super job. Oops, let me get the. Volume on. It's in here.
To the right, the laptop itself is
Pardon?
or next to the clock on the right. A little.
Click on the volume.
There you go. There you go. Oh, you'll be good.
What is it? Go both ways, you gotta have one side or the other.
All right, well, I'll just tell you about it. Really would like to show the video.
Did you send us the link?
I can't send you the link. I didn't send you.
No, but I could send you. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that.
Kathy, there's a plug that's not plugged in. Is that, do you see under there, there's a plug, I don't know
Don't worry about it, just.
Okay. Okay, let's talk
What's your
about
winner?
report cards. I have some nice slides, we'll go to that. Okay, basically the district strengths, let's focus on that. All four buildings exceeds expectations. So, all four of the buildings are the second from the top. Okay, way above, exceeding the expectations. If you look at the corner of the front of look at the front of the report card, none of our schools have deductions for any of the student engagement indicators. We have higher achieving, we're higher achieving than the state in both the reading and the math. We're higher student growth than the state for both the reading and the math. I'm going to explain what that is in a minute. We're closing the gaps at a higher rate than the state for both the reading and the math. And the math achievement is significantly higher than the state. Our AMOs, which is our measurable objectives achievement, is beyond anticipated. What they do is they take a 3-year rolling piece. I'll show you that in the next slide. They explain that on the video. But they anticipate what is the percent of students that should achieve in these sub-goal areas. And in 4 out of our 5 areas, we're achieving beyond that in reading, and 5 out of the 5 areas, we're achieving beyond that in math. So we're really doing well if you think about it, 90% in math. If you look at the areas that we need to grow in, as we talked about before, reading across the grades, but especially 3rd grade, because our 3rd grade scores, like we talked about in the annual meeting, are closer to the state average, but the other grade level scores are much higher, about 20 percentile points higher and more in the 50 ranges. We need to continue to close the gap in reading, and our special ed in reading is the one area, when I talked about the 4 out of the 5 in reading, the one area is special ed reading that we need to, we're not quite where we need to be as far as anticipated level of performance, where we should be. And then generally the lower level students are actually showing more growth than our higher end students, which can be a good thing, but also is just an area that we should continue to watch. Okay, I'll explain what that is a little bit more. If you look in all of the packets, if you look at the reading growth scores or the growth scores, which are more about in the middle of the packet, that to me has this kind of a 3-year growth trajectory, and this really says something to me, because if you look at this, what it's basically telling is that in your rolling 3 average, you had 122 students that were performing at the minimal performance level, and as that rolls out over consecutive years, of those 122 students who were at the minimal, 52 students stayed there, 55 moved to basic, so they made great growth. 14 of those minimal students got to be proficient, and 1 actually got to be advanced. Okay, so you see how you take this amount of students, and then you see how are they projected over time in their performance level. Once again, for basic, we had 302 students, okay? And so of those 302 students that were basic, 18 lost level, which is 2% of them, lost level and went to the minimal performance. But look at here, 112 students from this 302 became proficient, and 18 or 2% of those 302 students actually became advanced. So that's really exciting to see. Then, and you get points. Your points for your reading growth is determined on if you have a student that stays in minimal, you don't get a point for that student. If a student moves to basic, you get 1 point. If the student moves to proficient, you get 2 points. Okay, so when you move that way, you get points. The same way, when you move the other way, you might get minus points. So for proficient, we had 336 students who were proficient. Look at, we have 230 yet that are proficient. We don't get any points for them, they're still in the same. And then 39 of those students became advanced, so we get a +1 for those students. Of those 336 students in the district, these are district, 66 of those students went from proficient to basic. So we actually got a -1 on those students. And then one student became minimal from the 336. So that student represented -2 when they're figuring out the score. Then advanced, you see, we had 78 students who were advanced. We kept 23 of them, 53 went to proficient, and then 2 went to basic and none to minimal. Now, you do have to keep in mind when you're looking at these numbers that you have to understand that there are proficient students who are closer to advanced and proficient students who are closer to basic. So, you know, you have to recognize that. They might be 1 or 2 points away. So you have to keep that in mind when you're looking at all of that data. So looking at the student growth and analyzing the movement is very interesting. And sometimes the principals and the teachers will even go back and look at the actual students that are progressing or declining and look at ways in which they can enhance that. And then the other piece, when I was talking about annual measurable objectives, if you look at this piece here, it says that these are our target goals that are given to us. So you can see that our goal was that our Hispanic students, that 33.5% would be predicted to be successful, and the percent that we actually achieved was 42.1. Okay? Here for white, non-Hispanic, 45.8%, and we actually achieved over that, 50.8. So you can see for the most part, we're overachieving even the goals that the state is giving us. But just in this one area, students with a disability, the goal for the state was 31.8, and we achieved 24.9. Well, we have to look at that too and see of our special ed population, what are the specific needs of those students, and what can we do to enhance that learning. Because in the special ed realm, of course, there are so many differences in the needs of those students too. So, but that would take into consideration speech and language and all the other categories of special ed. So we really have to analyze that further to really see if there's something that we're missing or something that we can do further, provide further assistance on. Any questions about that part? And I will send you that so you can watch that little 5-minute video. It is really good.
Couple questions on that. When you define Asian or Pacific Islander, are you defining it based on their race, perceived race, origin, or how are you defining it? Or are they defining it?
It's always how they're registered in the system, how they define themselves.
Okay, so if you, let's say, have a young lady that came here as a baby from China, and she's obviously Asian, but she's grown up her entire time in Waterford system. Is she therefore defined as Asian? And why are we subgrouping her? She doesn't know that she's any different than any other student. Why would you extract that data out?
Well, we have to, go ahead, Mary.
The parent defines what their race, the child's race is.
And the reason why the state would want to watch for and record things in that manner is so that they can ensure that we're providing a curriculum that is fitting to all children. So if there are any specific needs, then we need to look at if there was any pattern of any specific race or.
Okay.
Do you have another question?
No, I'm just assuming it's the same thing with Hispanic. Let's say you have a student that has a mother who's German and a father who is of Latino descent, are you saying that student therefore is Latino?
That would be how,
Hispanic?
that would be how the parents would register the child
Hmm,
and how
okay.
they would say the ethnicity is.
Okay, so this data becomes somewhat useless in that it doesn't really reflect what we're looking for, which is, are they truly Hispanic, having come from a Hispanic culture recently, let's say from Mexico, Central America or something?
If you're talking English proficiency, then you would look at ELL population and their English level proficiency.
Yeah. Well, the reason I bring this up is, and I've brought it up every year since we're instituting, what is it, now, 2 years, Chris?
This would be the second.
Yeah, bringing up the first year. Second year, by the way, I'll have everybody recall, the Trailside was extremely advanced and won an award for the state report card system. And I brought up at the time, and everybody said, oh, no, we can't discuss that, which is the only reason that they were, and I'm not, let me preface this by saying the teachers do a great job at every school. It's not a reflection of the teaching and or administration with these report cards. They are skewed, and your first slide said they are a weighted average, which means that comparing us to the statewide, which is already a weighted average, and is inclusive of Milwaukee MPS, which draws the state average so low that the report card becomes somewhat useless. You would never compare Waterford to that and say that we're doing great. If we had comparisons to our local districts that are about the same size and makeup, that would be interesting for a parent, but this report in the front here is not interesting.
I can go on to DPI's website and look at the comparisons to.
Yeah, I know, I bring them all up.
districts.
And, I mean, even Waterford High School did exceptionally well on the state review. I have been privy to the fact that Waterford would not have done as well at the high school level, being the fact that the state didn't weight the average. There's a couple of things that could never have been gotten, except for you have to show some of them skewed, right? So all the data in these are interesting, but all skewed. So Trailside is now listed as our lowest school, yet last year was listed as our most advanced school. Is that correct, Chris?
2 years ago, Trailside was the most advanced.
Yeah. And it's not a reflection of the teaching staff. Our teaching staff is great. Our administration is great. It's a fact that because you skew it based on ethnicity subcultures and disadvantaged subcultures and disability subcultures, and you say that it's more important that you expand and advance a Hispanic group than a non-Hispanic group and give a higher ranking to that school, that to me is manipulation by the state. So the report card, although it's a data, it is so skewed, it becomes irrelevant of the actual real issues of the school. The data really doesn't help us. So I will say this, I think Trailside is doing as good a job now as Trailside has always done. Evergreen and those are always doing good, and we always are striving for increasing our reading scores. But to give any feedback to one individual school based on this, to me, is irrelevant because the data is so skewed, it doesn't portray facts anymore. And that's the
Well,
problem.
I think there are certain facts you can take away from any tool and certain things that you could argue about with any tool. I do think, with regard to Trailside, in the 11, in the 12-13 school year, if you look at reading, if you look in the last 2 years, 11, 12, and 12-13, in their AMOs, their annual measurable objectives, they were above the, in, page 17. I have the last other years here, so I could summarize that for you if you like, and send it to you. But, I mean, I agree with you that there's only so much you can take from any piece, but I also wouldn't feel good to have you walk away not understanding that the reason why Trailside would have been seen in that light at one point and be different now is because they were advanced and they're exceeding of students with a disability in reading for whatever reason during the 11, 12 and 12-13 school year. And then during the 13-14 school year, which could be a combination of students, but also could be, we need to look at what support we're providing there, is that they met only half of the anticipated annual measurable objective. They were supposed to reach 31.8 and they reached 15.3. So it at least makes us think, you know, Mr. D and I and the staff, okay, let's look at that. What else can we do for those students? We know the student population is changing there a little bit too. So what other kind of reading support can we put in place for that? And as required by Title I, because we're a Title I school there at Trailside, we have to take some of our Title I money and ensure that that objective is worked on and that it is improved. So, I mean, I agree with what you're saying. There's some pieces you can take from, some pieces you can't, but, you know, there are some things we should work on.
And I would think that the title, when we talked about before, went to a title spending money. I don't know if you can move Title 4K money to this type scenario. I would be more than happy to do that, but to a parent, parents are not going to delve that deep into this data back here. They're looking at this score up on top and they're going to say, oh, well, Trailside's not a very good school according to that score. And it's 100%
Well, they're still a
false.
great school.
You know?
76.1 is still exceeds expectation.
Oh, I understand, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Relative to the other scores, are going to say something is wrong with Trailside. And it's just not true because the subgroup is skewed. And you're right, it could be students moving in and out. You don't know what the reasoning was for that. But, I mean, it doesn't portray the overall character of the school, looking at these scores.
And if you look at student population, schools that are smaller can either, I mean, they either do one of two things. They either produce higher, or if it's harder to hide a few lower scores, just like it is in grading. So it could be that piece also. But Jim will talk about some of the things that we're going to be doing here. So. Any other questions? All right. We'll start with Evergreen.
In that packet I handed you, I had the last three report cards. A couple of things to note based on the discussion y'all just had. The school information component, that bottom left-hand box, is relatively stable. There's not a whole big jump if you look at comparing the three boxes. For example, special ed population went from 17.3 to 16.8. This year it's down to 16.7. So there's a huge jump. Same goes with the ethnicity or race, as well as the limited English proficiency. That being said, I certainly agree with Mr. Jensen. When you look at the top left-hand corner, in that area you'll see that 11-12 we were at 76.5, following year 78.4, and then this past year 82.4. So that shows a steady increase in overall achievement. With all that being said, certainly the teachers deserve a great deal of pats on the back for doing so. We were challenged specifically with closing that achievement gap. And if you look in the first year, it's the third down, again highlighted, 55 out of 100. Second year, 66.2 out of 100. And then last year, 72.4 out of 100. So that is on the increase as well, and on a steady increase. Again, agree with Dan, you can go deeper into the information, but I think those are the highlighted points. Within that packet, I also include what our building goal was, keeping in mind that we did not put the building goal together, or we put it together prior to receiving the 13-14 report card. So we had two sets of data, and again, we looked at that whole idea of closing the academic achievement gap. I think for me to read that to you, you have it in front of you, but we looked at some measurable goals that were realistic. So they were rigorous yet realistic. We're not putting something out in front of the teachers that we didn't think that we could come across. Involved in developing the student goal was the data day we did back in June. So again, I'd like to thank that data team that I worked with, that really put all the time and effort. And now as we go through our data days, one of the components of the educator effectiveness is you have the ability, if you come mid-year, that there's something you're seeing significant, you can manipulate, that's a bad word. You can adjust the goal fittingly based on the data as we're collecting it throughout the year. One of the things that teachers are really getting on board with is the idea of measuring the MAPS data from spring to spring, instead of fall to spring, because there's so many variables that can take place. And if you haven't touched on the variability factor, there's so many that could take place in measuring just fall to spring data. Kids are, we've got some kids, as we looked at the data, who in spring, or in fall one, we're at one number, spring at another number, then they come back for fall, and they're all the way back to this number. And we've got to balance that. So we're looking at doing more spring to spring measurements. I think that gives a little bit clearer picture as to what that curriculum issues are strong and what they need some type of work. I'm skipping to the action plan. Kathy has talked about training and reading literacy. In our building, Jackie Itzen has taken a leadership role in that component. I'm also going to compliment Ron Anderson, who has also been an assistant because of the large number of new teachers or long-term subject teachers. They've had to quickly react. They haven't been given the opportunity to be proactive. They've had to react to the situation. And both of those professionals have done one heck of a job. And I try to express that gratitude to them. We talked about mentorship programs to help students who need extra support. We are getting that. We are actually utilizing some of our special ed population who have a strength in reading, working with other special ed students who struggle with reading. So we're seeing some peer mentorship programs. We're also utilizing some of the students from Fox River who are coming at the end of their school day to work with some of our kids. And quite frankly, and this is meant no way negative towards teachers, there's a different kind of comfort level with some kids when they're working with peer or like peers. So we've implemented that. We are starting to better prepare for the Smarter Balance. Wednesday, Brenda Serby and myself will be presenting to the staff some preparatory strategies for the Smarter Balance. We're monitoring the balance progress, and we're doing quite a bit of profiling in a positive sense with some of our private students. Even with our Ames Web, we're to the point now where we're meeting an 8-week mark of Ames Web, so now we're going to gather that information and see how these kids are doing. Ultimate hope with this sheet of paper is to continue on closing the gap, but to even do it more radically, because we are ever so close to that magic number of 82.9. I went through the preliminary results looking for a mistake somewhere, and my wife looked for mistakes. Teachers, but we couldn't find it. So that's where we're at Evergreen. Again, that team that we gathered, and if I listen to names, I know I would forget one, but the team we gathered in June has been very instrumental in pushing forward on this, and not only pushing forward on it, but consistently referring back to it. So, steady gains. I did share the information with parents, the report card information in the email. I don't know if you remember that just showed the 3 years and give credit to where it belongs. That's everything. Any questions?
But just one on your data team, you strictly look at maps.
Not anymore. At one point that was true, Dan, but right now the data team has expanded that to look at maps. WKCE will add Smarter Balance to that, but we also have the Ames Web testing and the PALS testing as well. So when we sit with a child, we sit with the 4 of you, our children, and one of you, we have criteria in order for it to get the.
I mean, this KCE is going to be phased out real quick.
And then we'll have the Smarter Balance. Yeah.
Ms. Marco?
Okay. Can you hear me this way, or do I need to use that? You good? Okay. All right, Fox River goal, likewise with Chris, it's interesting, we developed a goal in June. when we did not have our state report cards, so I'll reference that in a few minutes, okay? But our goal at Fox River, we took the data from MAPS, we took the data from WKC. I had to get the data from the 3 elementary buildings because I didn't have the incoming 7th grade data at that point. So we dissected 6th grade data, 7th grade data, and even though our kids went up to the high school as 8th grader, we dissected the 8th grade data. And what we ended up with is that our goal at Fox River is by the spring of 2000, it's a 2-year goal, but by the spring of 2015, 80% of our 8th grade students and 60% of our 7th grade students will receive or achieve or maintain college or career readiness in reading according to their Lexile level. So we're taking a look at the Lexile level. With the emphasis on career and college readiness, we want to make sure that we are sending our students to the high school with the skills to be able to read, to be able to be on track with a college career in the area of understanding text and comprehension. That way, the high school teachers allows them to be able to prompt, guide, and coach the students to the higher levels that they need with the curriculum up at the high school. So we really wanted to focus on making sure kids, all of our kids, are going to the high school with the ability to read the information that they need to do to move forward. So with that said, we took a look at the data from our incoming 6th graders across the 3 buildings. We found out that at this point we only had 53, half of our kids coming in were at that point. So we need to move half of the kids that came in. We took a look at our 7th graders and we had only moved 60% of them the year before, not even knowing that we were working on this goal. And then if we had done our goal last year, we would have been sending 75% of our kids to the high school. So we would have fallen short by 5% of our goal up to the high school. So we set a realistic goal of we didn't completely achieve it, and yet we have a low level coming in with our 6th grade or our 7th graders. Thus, we have 2 years. We knew we weren't going to be able to move them instantly with that because of just all the transitional pieces that are in place, everything that takes place just moving to a middle school. So we have it set up by a 2-year goal. The way we are going to do this is we use the Lexile scores, which come off the MAP testing, and we've got the kids divided into 3 groups. And the group is, we take a look at the groups, and what we have is if you're below a 224, that would be our lower tier. Then we have between 224 and 237 with our minimum tier, our middle tier, and then we have the above the 237, because that college career number is 237 right in that area there, okay? So we equated that to the MAP testing, so that lower end, the minimum we need to move those kids is 5 grit scores. We need to move to 3, and then we need to maintain. In other words, we can't have those top kids slip backwards. And sometimes that's really hard when we're thinking about the top kids when they get to the middle school. So that is what our focus is on the particular goal and how we collected the data and where we're moving to move those people, the kids forward with that. So then fast forward to our state report card comes out. And I'm sorry, I think you have our state report card. I just didn't bring copies for you. If you really take a look at our state report card and you really dissect our report card with all the things Kathy said, but you look at the reading piece, where we are really stagnant is in our upper end. And our kids are doing all right on the upper end, but we're not moving them, okay? So we took a look at that higher end when we dissected our report card, and lo and behold, we didn't have a report card, but we put our goal together in June, and our goal aligned with how our report card came out. So I think that made us feel pretty good as a team. So our focus then is what we're going to be doing with some of these higher end kids and how we can move them forward. So now fast forward back to the action plan in June. So we put together 6 action plan pieces, because when you're talking about Lexile level, you're talking about a whole building. You're talking about, not all my teachers teach reading. I have math teachers, science teachers, social studies teachers, health teachers, as opposed to in the elementary where everybody is an ELA teacher. So we had to take a shift of informing and teaching our teachers about some of these things. So one of the goals is we have the compass that aligns to the map where kids get into their little backpacks, and they use it extensively in the elementary buildings, but it's always kind of fizzled away as you moved up to the middle school. we reinstituted that, and we have put things in place through our ELA program where kids are required to do X amount of backpacks in their strand area of work each week. So our lowest tier needs to complete 6 on a weekly basis, our middle needs to complete 4 on a weekly basis, and our upper has to complete 2 right on their MAP score area, and this is part of their grade in the ELA component. So that would be one action plan that the ELA teachers are focusing on. All of my teachers, science, social studies, health, we have all the kids broken down into tiers, and I don't have one of these for every one of you, but we have the entire math testing data for the whole building. We broke it down into the different tiers, and these are color-coded in their formative assessment books, their grade books, whatever the case may be. And every piece of informational text that our science and social studies teachers, our health teachers do, are tiered to the different lexile levels. So when you're reading a topic on invasive species, I pick it, you know, I'm in the blue, I'm in the red, or I'm in the yellow. You pick that, the informational text at your lexile level, and you're reading the same information, but it's at the lexile level developed for the student. So all of my teachers are working in that area. So that is our second action plan, where we have 3 tiers of every student in every class with appropriate reading at their tier level. Now, not everything is all the time at that level because you have to read at different levels. But a lot of those harder texts are put into into lexile levels, articles and so forth that we do. The second piece that we have going on is my science, my social studies, my health teachers. We are developing a literacy resource library. So they're putting together a library that is got things with closed reading in it, lexile levels. So we are developing like a library, so in the future years you can just pull out different things that are at the lexile levels for kids. So this year we're probably spending a little more time finding things, but it'll be helpful next year. Obviously you'll add to it, you don't use the same thing. But that would be what our third action plan is on our every other week with our faculty meetings. We break into teams and we're working on those. The next piece we needed to do was train my staff on what lexile level was, because once again, as a health teacher or science teacher, you don't teach ELA, even though you have the ELA literacy standards in your Common Core. Really understanding the lexile levels and what this is all about, and then piggybacking off of close reading and where we need to go. So with my reading teacher, Erin Dietz, I mean, she's just, the training she's been doing with these teachers, helping them to apply the lexile level and the close reading into the classroom. The third piece we put in is lots of times reading will taper off into the middle school, so we built in a reading incentive program that we do on a monthly basis. And kids have to read 3 outside articles on their own, not in class, and they submit them. We have a reflection form we put together, and they submit them to the appropriate teacher. This month happens to be social studies because the theme is history with the Veterans Day and so forth. Last month it was strange and mysterious and bullying. So you read areas, you pick them whatever you want, you turn the form into that teacher so you make a connection with that content teacher. September was physical fitness. It was so you'd had to turn your form into the FIO teacher. So you get to know that teacher a little bit better. And then during that teacher's prep, if you have 3 articles, you're called down. And like last month was 7th period, because that's when my ELA teachers had prep. And we have a little incentive thing we do for them. Last month they happened to, we picked pumpkins in a patch outside. They did pumpkins, we had nachos. We have some special things we give them. So we recognize these kids that are doing extra reading, because the more reading you do, the better you are. We're averaging about 20 each period here, so which I think is really good. I send you the emails on that. You see Erin forwards those things to you. And then the last thing that we're going to be doing is our 6th goal is we're working on an invisible shadow day. Each one of my teachers are going to shadow a student. The student will not know that you're being shadowed, but you're going to go through the life of a student, okay? You're going to do all the work, you're going to do everything the student does, and we're going to be focusing, we have a reflection form, we're going to be focusing on reading. So if you would ask me what does reading look like at the middle school, I might not be able to give you an accurate, any one of my teachers right now, analysis of that. So we are collecting data about what reading looks like at Fox River, so that will guide us where we're going on how we need to in-service some different things we're doing. And we're doing it through the lens of all students, equal males, equal females, and we're looking at, for every special ed student, we're doing a TAG student, we're doing a reading intervention, we're doing an at-risk student, we're doing a regular ed student, so we're getting a cross-section of the whole area, and so we're collecting the data on what reading looks like at a middle school on this given day, okay? So that's where we're going. Then when we took the report card, we really decided that we needed to focus in on that higher tier, and that's where some of the adjustments come in, like Chris talked about, adjustments that you make along the way. So the last meeting in October, on our day-to-day, we focused in on 20 students. We picked 20 students, and how we focused on the 20 students that we're going to focus in on is we took a look at the kids that were already college and career ready at some point in our building, but on their fall math data testing have slipped back. They're not there yet. So what is going wrong? What are we needing to do? We talked about what are the barriers, from motivation to endurance, to interest, to no stake in the game. What do we do to do these different, how do we help these kids? So we are in the process right now. One of the key instructional pieces we know is differentiating at the higher end. So with the health TAG teacher, Nicole Meyer, we're really working on this fact. Our faculty meeting this Wednesday is looking at 3 different things with differentiation for the higher end. So we're really focusing in on the whole building, looking at that piece. So take a look at everything ties together, even though it's kind of pieced together, but the bottom line goes around where we need to move Lexile from college career for when they move up to the high school, and then how do we continue to move that higher tier of people. We've been working on the lower tier, and we just really need to balance out both of those right now. Questions about the middle school?
Just one question I have, looking at your goals up there, the students, below 945 Lexile will grow 5 grade points.
Yep.
How does that compare for each of those with the spring to spring growth that you're looking for individual students?
For the end, how does that 5-point grid?
Or 3 or?
What we did was we took all the data and we dissected it apart. We put it on all these spreadsheets, and we took a look, and we took not a necessarily an average, but we looked at what the consistent growth was of kids in each of these areas. I mean, I can bring you stacks of data we have here. And we took a look at the college career piece, and then we divided it out, and that's how we came up with those points. Might we adjust them? Should they be a little more rigorous? Do we need to probably have that bottom one? Do they need to move at a higher rate? But we also want to be realistic.
Right.
We also want to be realistic, and for some of those kids to move 5 points will be tough. And for some of those higher kids to stay where they're at right now is also, it was kind of interesting, not kind of off path, but a kid came up to me this morning and said, Mrs. Markle, I got my new book I'm reading for my next thing at my Lexile range. And I said, oh, what are you reading? She says, I'm reading the dictionary, because that's at my Lexile level. I said, oh, well, let me know how that goes.
A long process.
So, I don't know if that answers your question or not, Dawn.
Yeah, that helps me understand where those came in.
Right, it's not, we didn't pull them out of a book that says that's what it is.
Right.
We took a data analysis and tried to find a good point.
With it being a 2-year goal, it'd be interesting to see when you look at the end of this year, kind of where it was and
Right.
any adjustments.
Yeah, and that's why, if we could do 60%, then that leaves us with a 20%, which could be our hardest grouping, plus anybody that regresses back for that from 7th to 8th.
I just want to add, first of all, you do an exceptional job as the administrator at that school, and have always had great students coming out of that school, going to the high school. And it's shown in the graduation rates of our high school as compared to surrounding districts and the state as a whole. And your teachers do an exceptional job, obviously, moving those students along. The issue I have sometimes is when we base testing such as this on the RIT scores and say, well, students move this much to get this area higher or whatever, you don't necessarily know that that student is capable of that growth, even if you push them along as much as you can. So you can only move as fast as possibly the student can handle moving or is capable of moving. But nonetheless, your teaching staff, and you do an exceptional job, and that our graduation rate is huge at that school as compared to other schools. But the only thing I see on here is the student growth rate is the only thing that kept you from being probably significantly exceeding expectations. And it's because of the regression on there. So the real question comes back to what Chris was saying. At what point do you take the reading scores of which these were derived from to get the data? Again, data doesn't necessarily show what you're looking for if it's taken at different points and different things are coming out of it. So I don't know that it's anything you even could change, you know?
Well, we're hoping we can change it. I mean, I understand your point with the numbers, but I think
Yeah.
kids need to have numbers in front of them. I think kids do good when they can monitor, they can see a number, they can see a target. It's not arbitrary, it's something on a piece of paper where a focus is, and we're revisiting it on a weekly, daily. Obviously, it'll be winter again when it's in front of them, so
No, I understand.
I appreciate that, Dan, but, I think you want to keep working on
Yeah,
kids.
and you will, and you'll do your best, and you always have, and always will. We'll still have great students. And, the one thing I'd add to that is I had one of those students at school, which would look at that number and say,
Yep.
well, a B is fine, I like a B,
Well,
right?
that goes back to where I said, is it motivation, is it endurance,
Right.
is it no stake in the game, is it
Or is it-
interest? Because you're right, we're in the middle years, and sometimes it's difficult to motivate these students until they get to the high school where there is different things, so we
Yeah.
try different things, but
All
I mean, I
students are
think,
different.
I get good kids from the 3 elementary buildings, so I think it makes our job a whole lot easier, and so I think that's probably the key, not probably, that is the key reason why we're able to do what we do, because of the kids we receive.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Trailside, back in June, when we looked at the data, we saw a clear achievement gap between the regular population and the students with disabilities and students who are economically disadvantaged. And put both graphs up, I mean, it was clear as day as there was not only there was a gap, but there was no closing of the gap. When we put our goal together, we decided to look at students with disabilities and students who are economically disadvantaged. And that's how we came up with the second part of the goal. Kat, if you want to just go to the next. Okay. We looked at last year the number of students, special education students who met their target growth, and it was about 33%. So we decided as a goal to double that. That's when we got to 67%. That's why you see the 27% or 415 special education students who made 1.5 times their growth. Last year there was only 2 students that did that, so we doubled that to get to 27%. That's with the 80% and the 42%. And also on the school report card, it was very alarming that we had the no for the Met target for the special or students with disabilities. So when we met as a staff in August, that was a huge red flag that we all know that we need to focus on. Some things that we're doing this year is our special education teachers, when they pull out students, they're now using research-based interventions that they're very excited about. In February, we'll be starting implementing the Sunday system, and Sandy asked me to talk about that. Other districts are using it, and they see great results. I myself will be attending a level of literacy intervention conference with the 2 special education teachers and Sandy Finnegan, so that I can, become a better coach for the teachers when it comes to reading interventions. We're sticking with the progress monitoring, also the title programming to help these students with the economically disadvantaged. We really pulled together as a staff to really focus on this population of students to get them up and close that achievement gap at Trailside.
One other thing that I wanted to point out is, if you notice the economically disadvantaged on the Trailside 13-14 report card is 36.6. If it gets to 40, then we can go to what they call a school-wide title model, which means that you can use the title, you have to fill out a whole probably 100-page document on all the different areas of the school and all of that, but if it's approved, then you can use your title money for any student, anytime, any teacher, anytime. So that means, like right now, we have students that we designate, and only those students who are seeing the title teacher can get the materials of the title teacher that we bought through title funds. But if we get to that 40%, then we would be able to use any past title materials as well as future purchases. So we could do whole school staff developments, we could do lots of different things that we can't do now. So we'll keep an eye on that. All right, and Woodfield.
And, excuse me, I just want to say, first of all, it was just having the summer, the days that we had to analyze data was a good experience for all of us. Because when you take a couple of days to really look at things of where are your strengths and where are your areas of deficit, just having the time to do that was so appreciated. And in doing that, in looking at, for Woodfield, all of our data, we looked at many forms of data. It wasn't just the WKCE at this point in time, but it was all of the things that teachers use. And one of the things we learned is to help in growth is to get that focus, that piece of focus. So one of the areas we wanted to focus on was vocabulary acquisition and vocabulary usage with our students. So we decided on the focus there, and that we would really study, as we looked, I think one of the places was in running records and also in math data, that in breaking that down, that was an area that impeded progress for a number of our students. Excuse me. And so we focused on that, and we are focusing on that. And as we did that, we looked at data not from fall to spring, but from spring to spring. And that, of course, was a little bit of angst because it's a little more rigorous for all of us to look at data. Because when you look at data, there's two ways in terms of the effort. When we talk about that students are making their gains in a way that's their anticipated growth. So for a student, it's like, here's where you are, and here's where, by putting in a lot of effort, here's where you can be, but that doesn't take you to grade level. So in the next piece is, how do you make it a little bit more rigorous and take them to closer to grade level, which means that some of our students now have to make that 1.5 growth. And that's pretty rigorous and challenging, but it's getting students closer to the grade level. Can they all do it? That's our hope. That's why you form a goal, is that you have that to work toward. And so as teachers and staff, we are spending every Wednesday, as all of our staff are doing across the district, working on our goal, providing in-services, providing conversation on how we're going to do that. And teachers are looking at that as teams, as staff across the district to do that. And we're also looking at what are good practices of teaching reading, and especially for our building in vocabulary acquisition, word study. When we talk about how to help our students, one of the important pieces is the differentiation piece. So in the small groups, where it's guided reading, we're trying very hard to deliver instruction that's appropriate for the grade level of where they're at. So when Darlene was referring to our students who are way up here, and sometimes they're not going to where they should be. Thus, when we're providing guided reading instruction, we want to do it at the student's level as best we can. And in giving them their seat work, their independent work, we want to make it more challenging for them so that it's taking them to their level. But then we also want to be very aware of those students who have to make that extra growth. What are we going to do? What kind of practices? What kind of academic instruction are we going to give those students to make sure that they're getting that 1.5 year growth that we want? So the spring to spring data is a little more rigorous for teachers, but we're working on it, walking it through, and giving ourselves ways in which we can learn how to do that, have those conversations, but with the emphasis on vocabulary and word usage for Woodfield. That's what we're working with.
no, I really applaud them in working with their teams on their goals. We have to remind ourselves, because the teachers want to make sure that that goal is met, and really these are stretch goals, these are very lofty goals, and they may take many years to accomplish, and that's perfectly fine. And it's not, it's along the way, all the things that people are doing, but not to lose sight of the great things that we're doing already. These are just tweaks to what we're doing to try and get a few more kids.
I think it's the same thing as we're saying with the state SLOs that teachers have. It's not about, did you get to the magic number of the goal, but what was the process in the journey of getting to the goal? What have you learned? What have you reflected on? What have you changed in practice and instruction? And I think that's the important piece, so it's remembering all of that, but and not having angst over, did I absolutely make that number, but what did I learn in the process of doing all of this good work? I think that's most important.
Congratulations to everybody involved. It's a big achievement, and I definitely understand what Dan was saying, but at the same time, everybody is compared against the same measuring stick, and not everybody achieved these results. So, great job in doing it. Two of the schools in a fraction of a point of significantly exceeds, and in my opinion, you got it. But great job, everybody.
No, I agree 100%. You do a fantastic job, and the teaching staff should be commended. I mean, think about it, we almost had a significantly exceed for an elementary listing, and 1/10 of a point off. Now, who knows how the weighting factor came into play on that, right? But one thing I'll disagree with is we're not weighted with the same stick, and here the problem is based on your subgroups, and they were meant to do that to skew up some of the larger inner cities to make them look like they're doing something, because their numbers were so far off the charts, they had to skew some of them things. So when you look at ours, because our subgroups are smaller, getting an 82.9 is an exceptional job. Getting a high score, not high score, but a relative score in a larger inner city, sometimes because you hit the 40%, you can write your own things, and subgroups skew the numbers. You're not looking at the same data when it comes out that number versus anything else. I mean, that's what happened with the Trailside a couple years ago. It made it look like it was so exceptional that as a administrator in that school, there was no way to live up to that same number the next year down the line, because the data was skewed.
No,
And that's the problem.
And I get what you're saying. I'm just
Yeah.
saying that other like schools like us
Yeah.
are measured against that same stick, and maybe they're getting the same marks.
Yeah, we do have
So
stuff.
we're getting that.
And Trailside are doing a great job watching the economically disadvantaged, which is the only thing skewing those data numbers right now.
Anything else regarding